what's going to drive the election outcome? You can think about the short-term factors, the campaigns, the policy promises, and those things we just don't know are going to happen between now and the election itself. But you can also think about the fundamentals, like why has the Conservative Party gone from having a secure majority in 2019 to now being so far back in the opinion polls, as we're seeing consecutively over months and months and months. So we can look at this graph, which is an average of opinion polls from 2019 through to 2024. And you can see a number of interesting things. And the beginning of this graph shows a honeymoon period, that's very normal, a loss of support as the pandemic started to take hold, an increase in support with the vaccine rollout, and then we see a dramatic and very clear drop there. And that was around the Partygate period, this period where Boris Johnson became embroiled in stories of parties, lockdown breaches in Number 10 and across government. So the health shock is the first shock, and that moved a lot of Conservatives to undecided during that period of time. You can also see, though, that kind of overlapping that period, inflation had started to rise above 2%, which was the target at the time. And so as inflation started to take hold, as things became more and more difficult for people in the country, you start to see their support decline also. And what we've seen is that in most recent periods, the economy, the economic experiences and evaluations of the national economy have started to matter even more as that's taken hold further and further as inflation has pushed prices up and up and up. Even as inflation comes down a bit, of course, prices are still rising, people are still finding life more difficult. So that economic shock's really important too, but difficult of disaster for the Conservatives in terms of their reputation. Then you have a really important political moment, and that kind of compounds all of those difficulties in the economy. And this is the moment of the Truss mini budget. This kind of budget, not a budget, but a statement about tax measures and so on that had the markets reacting so negatively. The Conservative Party loses its reputation, its lead as the party most trusted on the economy in this period, and you see this very sharp decline, and really things not get better for the Conservative Party since. In fact, things have been getting, if anything, a bit worse as Reform UK has started to take votes away from the Conservative Party. So there are two really important shocks. We've seen them shifting vote support for the Conservatives. We've seen them really shaping the fundamentals. If we think about what people will be focusing on between now and the election, they won't be focusing on these major events, but these major events will be in the background. They will be the things that the parties are now trying to respond to and trying to turn around or change their electoral fortunes. Anand, it's lovely to have you here in Nuffield College. Thank you so much for coming in. With all of your amazing expertise, there really is nobody like you who has followed British politics just so forensically over the last 4 years.
Yeah.
Looking at those data and thinking about where the Conservatives are now in the opinion polls, do you think they can recover going into the general election?
I'd say two things. Firstly, if the last 10 years has taught me anything, it is predicting things in British politics is a mug's game. And the second contradictory thing is I find it very, very hard to see how they recover, given how far they're behind, how stubborn the Labour lead has proven to be, and how close we are to a general election now.
So what do you think would have to happen for the Conservatives? I mean, not necessarily to get back to where they were, I think that's for the birds, but to get into kind of contention again.
Well, I'd say two things. Firstly, they need some sign that what they're doing is working. And that's not just on the economy, where we are getting those signs, but I think also on immigration, where it's less clear in a way, particularly with the small boats, that they can do much. And secondly, they need a Labour implosion, so a massive internal fight that goes public within the shadow cabinet or something. But I think they need both those things at this point, and simple progress on policy, given the fact that the majority of the people think that the Conservatives don't have competence across the board. I mean, it's amazing, isn't it? Labour ahead of the Tories on immigration. So it will take a lot.
So thinking about competence, one of the key kind of pieces of work that we've done has been looking at the loss of competence for the Tories, especially on the economy, and how the economy has shaped electoral support over this period of time. And we saw with the Liz Truss mini budget, that short period of time when she was Prime Minister, 49 days I think it was, wasn't it, that the Conservatives lost their lead on the economy. So, in your opinion, thinking back to that particular moment in British politics, do you think that's the moment the Conservatives lost the election?
I think there were two moments. That was certainly one of them. The other was Partygate, because I mean, if you look at the polling, there were two big drops in Tory support. One coincides with Partygate, the other with the mini budget. But I think the mini budget matters more because what the evidence suggests is economic competence is crucial when it comes to elections. And when you lose it, it is very, very hard to get it back. And what history seems to suggest is if you really lose your reputation for economic competence, you don't really get it back till the other side's done the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. I was asked a question the other week, is Labour kind of in a two-term government situation looking at its position in the polls? And one of my thoughts was, well, Labour's support is so much a function of those losses of Conservative competence, that they don't have that kind of depth of attachment or trustworthiness or feeling. So what do you think are the risks for an incoming Labour government if indeed Labour do win the election, which at the moment looks the most likely outcome, of course? So what do you think are the sort of risks, and do you see there being a sort of one-term or two-term Labour government in that kind of scenario?
Well, the risks are, firstly, volatility. I mean, we've seen this remarkable turnaround since 2019. And, the law of physics is what goes up can go down. So these votes all feel a little bit soft, and people aren't, as you know, as wedded to party loyalty as they once were, and people are far more prone to switch who they vote for. So firstly, there's that people are more willing to change their votes between elections. And secondly, I think, is the fact that Labour have to deliver. As you quite rightly said, Labour are doing well because people have lost faith in the Conservatives. There's not much in the polling that indicates they've got loads of faith in Labour, and Labour will face a very, very difficult situation. When it comes to immigration, we've rehearsed the problems over and over, but stopping the boats is going to be very, very difficult indeed. And we have a pretty grim economic situation as well. This really isn't 1997, where Ken Clarke bequeathed an economy that allowed Tony Blair to invest in public services without increasing people's taxes. So my fear actually about this election is that the stakes are sky high afterwards, which is we've had 14 years of Conservatives. The people don't think they've delivered, but if Labour don't deliver, then I think the victim will be faith in politics as a whole. They're all the same, none of them can do anything, and I think that would be very damaging.
And it seems that Keir Starmer's sort of understood that because his initial first steps, as he called them, they're modest, aren't they?
They are.
I guess for that reason.
They are, yeah. And I think this is a very sensible game of expectations management. It makes perfect sense for me for the Labour Party to be saying the Tories have made such a mess of stuff, it's going to take a long time to turn it around. And it's quite interesting that Starmer talks explicitly about a 10-year project. Though we should all remember that Boris Johnson spoke explicitly about a 10-year project in 2019 as well.
Fair. So what kind of campaign do you think the two major parties are likely to run?
Well, they're both being pushed towards doing quite presidential campaigns. As you saw with Labour's first steps, there's a big picture of Keir Starmer.
Looking like Tony Blair.
Yeah, looking sleeves rolled up and everything. So I think they'll be personal because that's how our politics works now. The problem, of course, is we have two people at the head of the big two parties, neither of whom is particularly inspiring or indeed particularly political. So it's going to be a strange campaign. My sense is it'll be in many ways quite an underwhelming campaign where two people who are just a little bit uncomfortable doing this face off against each other. So I suppose whoever does less badly is going to come out better. But, this isn't a campaign with someone like a Tony Blair involved who actually had the capacity to get people interested and excited.
And Boris Johnson, I think.
Indeed, absolutely.
People would say the same about him. So an underwhelming campaign for an electorate that's fundamentally underwhelmed about politics at the moment. So that will be exciting for us and fascinating for us, but maybe not the campaign that's going to really engage those voters who are sort of undecided. Perhaps.
I think that's true, and I think there is a perception that in substantive policy terms, there's not that much to choose between the two parties. This isn't a great battle of competing ideologies, as perhaps we saw in 2017, where the campaign really did make a difference, and where actually there were two very clear ideological visions coming into conflict with each other. And I think history suggests that when there is a perception that there isn't much to choose between the two parties, interest and turnout is quite low.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. Anand, it's been amazing to talk to you. It's lovely
Pleasure
to see
as always.
you, as always. Yeah, lovely to see you. and we'll look forward to talking to you maybe again before the election happens itself.
Delighted to.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We will be sharing more insights using data and survey analysis of the 30,000 person British election study internet panel data between now and the elections.